This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps Association and Foundation. The Marine Corps wants Marines at all levels to be able to make sound and timely decisions, and Marines can hone their decision making capabilities by being put into situations that require them to think critically. One way that the Marine Corps Association supports this is by providing decision forcing cases. A decision forcing case is a decision making exercise that places participants in the roles of historical protagonists who, at some time in the past, faced a particularly challenging problem. In that role, participants are asked to devise, deliver, defend, refine, and critique solutions to the scenario as the scenario moves forward in time, creating new problems and opportunities. DFCs allow Marines to develop vicarious experience, develop decision making skills under pressure, and foster critical thinking and creative problem solving. This is one of the many ways MCA supports Marines through an adult learning methodology. Learn more about our programs and support to Marines at mca-marines.org/professional development. That's mca-marines.org/professional development. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, welcome to episode 164. This week, we dive into the Commandant's Planning Guidance 2024. Last month, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Smith, released his vision for the service and his intent to provide strategic direction for the Marine Corps. Colonel Chris Woodbridge joins us again to talk about some of the history behind the Commandant's Planning Guidance document, the challenges that the Commandant identifies, and how the criticisms of the document remain as omnipresent and as persistent as they were in previous iterations of the CPG. Recent Gazette articles have discussed some of the experimentation and innovation that the Marine Corps is exercising based on the CPG. Check those out on our website, as well as links to the August 2024 CPG. And if you like us, please like us and give us a review. We'd love to get your feedback. Okay, here's episode 164. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us. Today I have Colonel Woodbridge in studio. Sir, thanks for making the trip over.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, really
Yeah,
appreciate
it's
you.
It's a long walk from my office.
Yeah, I know. So we're going to talk a little bit of, well, not a little bit. We're going to actually dive into the current Commandant's Planning Guidance that was just recently released. Sir, what are your thoughts?
So I think in a lot of Marines' minds, finally, a number of areas, number of offices within the Marine Corps and the operating forces as well have been waiting for this. I think one of the important things to think about is sort of the rest of the story. The Paul Harvey rest of the story. The Marine Corps hasn't always had Commandant's Planning Guidance. It's a relatively new thing. It started out as formal documents, really in the 1980s.
And that would be what, like white letters, right?
There were white letters,
Yeah.
and commandants of the Marine Corps don't misunderstand. Certainly issued guidance, but the use of that guidance as a public communications product is relatively new, and the first, or certainly one of the first, that filled that role as this outward-facing public communications, public messaging document was General Krulak's Commandant's Planning Guidance, which he was able to issue within days of taking over as commandant at the end of the 1990s. It was crafted with a staffing methodology, but that's important to note. Some Marines probably think that the Commandant's Guidance is written purely by the Commandant, dark room, pen and paper, maybe some whiteboards,
Cigarettes, ashtray.
yeah, exactly. But it's a staffed document, and so all members of the command, and in this case, the command is the Marine Corps, have some input and some say concurrence, non-concurrence, staffing with the content of that document. And this is really at the 3 and 4-star level. So the commandant, the assistant commandant are the arbiters of what the final document really is and looks like. The deputy commandants across all the different communities, areas of the MAGTF and the Marine Corps have input to it. The operating forces, the force commanders, have input to it. And of course, the components. So the reserve component also has input to this. And that's produced really, again, since the late 90s, a series of documents, commandant's planning guidance, public documents that are communications tools and in some ways more or less aspirational in character, meaning this is what we want to do, and focused on some very specific audiences in that regard. So yes, the commandant's planning guidance is a way that the service chief, the commandant, communicates with the force. So Marines, this is what we're doing, and this is why. But it's also for communicating with the public. So America, this is what your Marine Corps is doing. And perhaps most importantly, it's a communication tool within the Department of Defense and within Congress. So it points to both the administration. We know what your guidance is for the Department of Defense, for the services, and this is how we're meeting that guidance. And then for Congress, who ultimately pays the bills, who holds the purse strings, these are our priorities. In order to meet this guidance that we've been given, this is what's important to us. This is where we need your support legislatively for the appropriation of funds to do these things. That's what this has become. Now, I don't think we've had a leader like General Smith who has more preparation and is more well suited to producing and leading the effort to develop a document like this. Remembering that from 2019 to 2021, as Lieutenant General, he was the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. So the modernization, equipping, organizing, training aspects of the Marine Corps were largely led by him, by that staff of CD&I, Combat Development and Integration, throughout that period. So that's obviously an enormous leadership burden, but also a learning environment about how the process is involved in developing capabilities for the Marine Corps and tying concepts to requirements.
And that, as far as what you're saying, as far as the evolution of the CPG, that almost seems to go hand in hand then with, I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, but generally speaking, the deputy commandant of CD&I ends up as either the ACMAC or the CMC at some point. I mean, right?
So there have been a few, but it's
recent times for sure.
Yeah, but it's not a it's not a conveyor belt.
Okay,
it's not a given.
I guess that's right, because General Neller was
that's right.
Marcent,
He had Marcent.
Yeah.
He did some time at headquarters Marine Corps as a colonel. He commanded the university, so in the training and education side. But he moved from Marcent into the commandancy. General Amos had been assistant commandant, had been McCitic CD&I. General Dunford had not. And then you can
yeah.
But it makes sense for a number of reasons. Just from a general officer assignment, general officer management perspective, the learning and the experience that goes on at CD&I points directly into understanding really a lot of the decisions that the commandant's gonna need to make, and the priorities that the commandant will need to set. Um, General Smith, in addition to that time, was the assistant commandant
Hmm.
for almost 2 years, and during that time, because of the delays in confirming officers to
That's right.
assignments, um, he, after General Berger retired 10 July of 23, he served until 22 September as the assistant commandant, performing the duties of commandant. So again, in terms of preparation and development of the knowledge and experience to be in the position of commandant, I don't think we've had someone with those that level of experience and credibility ever before. Um, the document reflects that. I mean, he had a very clear understanding of the need to modernize, which again goes back to uh, uh, General Neller's commandancy and General Dunford's commandancy before that. Um, General Dunford talked about modernizing the rest of the MAGTF to essentially catch up with the capabilities of the F-35, of the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35, because the between the air combat element and the rest of the MAGTF, you'd opened up this
Because it could even
capability, and
talk, right?
right,
Yeah.
in some cases,
Yeah.
this technological and capability gap. So catch the rest of the MAGTF up with the F-35. General Neller went further, and in testimony pointed that under the national defense strategy of that period, so 2017, 2019, the Marine Corps was not ready to compete against or fight against a peer adversary. The argument could be made that at that time and up until really a few years ago, the only relevant capability in the fight against a peer adversary was the F-35. And even then, its ability to close with, project power, and be relevant in the fight was limited, partially by the rest of the MAGTF, partially by the exposure of the platforms that it has to operate off of. If you can't close an aircraft carrier or an America class LHA into a relevant distance to your adversary target area, then even the F-35 becomes irrelevant in that fight. And so General Berger was faced with this challenge of modernizing capabilities now across the MAGTF to be relevant as directed by the National Defense Strategy against a peer adversary, People's Republic of China, in a pacing scenario. And the pacing scenario is a congested maritime campaign in the South China Sea area. And so that has remained consistent across two national defense strategies and defense planning guidances. Those will be up for change here soon, regardless of the outcomes of the election. But I think it's fairly reasonable to see that threat and that scenario aren't going to change because they're the most difficult, in some cases, you would say the most dangerous environment
Hmm.
to plan against. And so you plan and develop capabilities against the hardest thing, and you maintain capabilities against the most likely things. And so in this document, in General Smith's CPG, his Commandant's Planning Guidance, that's really across the board. The underlying message of it all is modernizing the force, modernizing capabilities, but maintaining relevance in broad global crisis response, and recognizing that balance may require trade-offs or will require trade-offs of capability, and will also require accepting risk in some areas. and it specifies that the risk can be accepted, or it posits that the risk can be accepted in near term um, uh, uh, combatant commander availability. So near term availability for Marines to be forced um, force generation and force deployment options for combatant commanders. So that's a significant thing.
Well, has that soothed over any of the criticisms that we've
I
heard?
was gonna say, yeah, because
Be-
the threats on the paper seem to not have changed as well as the threats to the paper.
Right.
They've
So no,
not changed.
that's no, that's a great point. And another point that I'll make is even as we sit here, the criticism is ongoing, and it's there are forces at work taking this document apart, certainly line by line, sentence by sentence, if not word by word, um, with a critical eye that's largely bound by some confirmation bias. All right, and so uh, I'll make an editorial comment about that. In the front part of the document, there's sort of three areas of front matter. There's an area about the current environment, the changing character of war. All of that is very consistent with um, some of the rationale behind modernization efforts that began under General Berger. And it is focused again on both modernizing for that peer threat and maintaining capabilities for broader crisis response. But there's another front matter section, smaller one, called the fiscal environment. And the bottom line is indeed the bottom line. That fiscal environment is what creates the dynamic tension that forces all the service chiefs, to include the commandant and the entire Department of Defense, to make choices about capabilities. And so the goal in all of this, I would say, is consistent with being as right as possible without being precisely wrong. But there are some critics out there who really focus on the risks that are presented by divesting some legacy capabilities. And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't really that much of a choice. It had to be done, again, based on the fiscal environment. Um, the the idea that we have infinite resources to fund any national defense program is just not true. You also see in this document, and this is something a little different, um, is the idea of military problems or military capabilities being affected by issues outside military solutions. So, sustaining the force, recruiting and retaining Marines. Recruiting happens in an environment that's not under the control of the military. All right. Military forces, all of them to include the Marine Corps, in an all volunteer force, recruit from the population of the United States. Changes in that population have created enormous challenges. And last year, by very, very slim margins, the Marine Corps was able to maintain its position as meeting its recruiting
Pun
goals.
intended, based off of one of the things that's keeping kids out.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Not slim at all. But the other services had greater challenges, greater problems, did not make their goals, and there's nothing to say that the Marine Corps will in this year. There's certainly the Marine Corps can do certain things that the other services can't because of our ethos, because of our really the perceptions of serving as a Marine. It's harder to it's harder to sell that sort of intangible in the Army and the Navy and the other services. But they do. They do. Um, the other elements that are a little different is a further recognition of the linkage between retaining Marines and quality of life, not just for the Marine but for the Marine's family. And so, where that rests in this document is on in an area where we have we've used as a bill payer in the past, and that's on our installations. And so you look at one of the supporting plans that predates this document, Barracks 2030. You look at installations and logistics future, and there's a very clear priority being set to improve quality of life for our Marines and their families when they're at home station, not when they're deployed forward. There's a security aspect to that as well, and the document does a very good job of explaining or highlighting that our homeland is vulnerable, and therefore our installations are vulnerable as power projection platforms. Those vulnerabilities are subject to infrastructure degradation within the U.S. So the effects of weather aren't necessarily mitigated properly, but it also recognizes that if you're involved in conflict against a peer adversary, and that peer adversary has the ability to attack you at home, they will. And so that in turn leads to requirements for hardening infrastructure and creating redundancies in power, water, etc. on our installation. So there's a security piece to this and a quality of life piece that's articulated in the document. Again, why is it there? Because it communicates priorities to those who hold the purse strings and those who make policies that will affect the ability to take action and create these capabilities. I think it does a very good job of doing that. It's always easier to edit a paper than it is to write one, and so again, there's certainly a group of very experienced folks out there who helped to develop this document, and there's an equally well-intentioned and experienced group of folks out there who will criticize the document and will, in some cases, do that at a very, very detailed level. Again, line by line and word by word. But that talks to another evolutionary aspect of Commandant's planning guidances as documents. And in some circles, they almost get treated like scripture.
Yeah, it's like sacrosanct, right?
Exactly.
And if it's not in, don't worry about
yes.
it. Or why isn't it in there?
Yeah,
and if it's in there, like, why are you doing something else?
That's precisely correct. That at a very sometimes are less mature or less experienced junior leaders will treat it like dogma, will treat it as sacrosanct, and when every period of instruction in every formal schoolhouse begins with a quoting of some section of the Commandant's planning guidance, we've probably gone a little further with the real purpose behind this. One of the things that I'll point out that is in the document in two sections is referring to the document itself as top-down guidance. And we all know that whether it's the targeting cycle in fires and artillery or air planning, there's the other half of that is bottom-up refinement.
Mm-hmm.
And so General Smith and Sergeant Major Ruiz are inviting bottom-up refinement, commentary, input back on this document, and so that's important. I mean, other Commandant's planning guidances have talked about it being iterative and creating a dialogue, but I think it's it's valuable that it's here explicitly in black and white. And I'll say that for a couple of reasons. Why is it important that really requirement? So
Because it keeps us employed.
you're he's not wrong. 2 points. Number one is it sends a clear message that that this is not sacrosanct, that this is not dogma, this is not written in stone and requires
The instructions
refinement.
for the holy hand grenade.
It requires some refinement and commentary, and it requires it from the Marines who are doing the job now, from the commanders and the deck plate, fighting hole level, mechanic line, hangar level Marines who are doing the job now, because they're closest to the pointy end of the problem, and they may, in fact, have the best, most effective, most practical solutions to those problems. It's not as valuable or as important for a I don't agree that that's the number one threat to world stability. No, but this is a better way to do sustainment of because I work in the Marine Wing Support Squadron. This is a better way to do distributed sustainment and parts acquisition for deployed F-35 or Osprey aircraft. Those sorts of detailed solutions are where the feedback and the input are most valuable. And to William's point, obviously, the Marine Corps Gazette provides a forum, a platform for that type of discussion and that type of discourse. Discourse, not necessarily debate.
Well,
I'll use that. I'll just drop
Yeah.
a point on that. So, debate is, and we've seen a couple here recently, but debates have rules, and debates produce a winner, right? And so that sort of argument, I don't think it's a relevant analogy to what we're really talking
Yeah,
about
good
here,
point.
because there are no rules, and it's irrelevant if there's a winner in that argument. The point is to make the Marine Corps better, and you do that by professional dialogue, discourse, discussion of those key points, and who better to do that, who best to do that than the men and women in the arena now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to get to it seems in a way to get ahead of one of the early criticisms from General Berger's initiatives, and that was the lack of experimentation. And so if you do have Marines that are actually doing it and you are welcoming that bottom-up refinement, then it does allow then for these concepts to be iterative and these sorts of things, because you're welcoming that feedback from the folks that are still in the experimentation phase, right?
Well, and that's exactly right. And there's an interesting statement in the document that experimentation can be done as a formal part of the combat development process, or to be more correct in terminology, the expeditionary force development process, since the order changed back in the 2000s. And that experimentation is largely under the purview of the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. But the document itself says that the Marine Corps, the operating forces, will operate with experimental or developmental capabilities. That's another way of saying we're experimenting. It's less formal, but I think it accelerates the process. And as long as there's that input and feedback loop, it makes it more effective and it makes it faster to do the learning. Again, this talks to a campaign of learning. That's a part of it. So it's there's the traditional or formal method is for the warfighting lab to develop a concept, find some surrogate equipment, stand up an experimental special purpose MAGTF, go do an exercise and experiment for experimental purposes with that equipment or those organizational changes or capabilities. The other way is to take 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines on their next MU deployment
Yep.
and give them that experimental equipment, recognizing that they may need to use it in a real world fight. So again, who better to provide that impact, that input, that assessment of those capabilities than the Marines who are most experienced operating at that level.
And we've seen some good stuff coming through, shameless plug time through the Gazette on folks who have gone out, done the Nordic stuff.
Yes.
Some of the changes we've seen in Balakatan as far as partnering with, our allies in the First Island Chains. Lots of. I think we did. There was one that went through. Was it Romania or? And there's been a lot of really cool stuff, and it's been coming through our desk.
Shameless coming attractions. We've had a series of articles from 2nd Marine Division.
Yeah.
The GCE of TUMEF.
Yeah, the MiG, all that MiG stuff. Yeah.
Who have been doing exactly that and explaining how we fight. The title of the series across different elements of the division, how they fight now and how they're developing and assessing capabilities for the future. The last chapter, the last article in that series will be appearing very soon, and it's written from the Division G4 perspective, getting specifically after the challenges and the capabilities to overcome challenges in sustaining forces in that distributed environment or stand-in force environment. So, yes, that's the whole purpose of the Gazette, is to provide that forum for that feedback, and always from a perspective of finding and recommending solutions and looking for those aspects that other folks may not have thought about because they're not as close to the problem.
Yeah. Well, sir, thank you so much for coming in and learning us something on this. And for our listeners, check out, we have links on our website to the most updated Commandant's planning guidance. Also, you can check out Gazette and see where, and please don't just check out Gazette, but participate in it. If you got some thoughts, if you have some experience with these things, let us know, send some stuff in, and let's keep the conversation going. We don't practice debate here, but let's keep the conversation going. The professional discourse. All right, listeners, thank you so much. Units all over the world engage in professional military education experiences with the Marine Corps Association's help. Marines learn from historic battles ranging from the D-Day landing at Normandy and Marine amphibious landings on Pacific Islands to the Battle of Marathon between Athenians and Persians in 490 BC, to military engagements in the Korean and Vietnam Wars, to battles which took place in the United States during the Revolution and Civil War. Discussing the operational, cultural, and historical significance of battlefield experiences is an invaluable learning tool for expanding a Marine's knowledge and preparedness for future missions. While the character of warfare changes, the nature of it does not. The opportunity to explore the decisions made or ignored in battles throughout history, the opportunities gained or lost by leaders in past combat experiences, is invaluable as a tool for facing today's military challenges. Learn more about this MCA program for Marines at mca-marines.org/battle-study-packages. That's mca-marines.org/battle-study-packages. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.